Here are 5 interview tips for aspiring software testers. 1. Use examples. So when possible, when you're asked for your experience in, say, working in Agile, or working with test automation, or working with exploratory testing, include examples of when you've done this in the past. So don't just say, "Oh yes, I've done that." Elaborate. Even if you are not asked to provide an example, I think it can be very helpful to do so because it shows that you know what you're talking about. 2. Practice. There are various ways in which you can practice. I would say there tends to be common sets of questions or patterns that you are likely to be asked in an interview. So you could ask a friend, a loved one, to ask you these questions, and then you could practice on them. The best is to practice with someone who you know can give you helpful feedback, so they could tell you what they thought of the question or your answer. One thing when it comes to practice that I think is very useful is recording yourself. I think Phil Wong, in my book Starting Your Software Testing Career, mentioned the tip of recording your voice and then playing it back to learn from that. I think it's interesting for people to see or hear how they come across when they speak. So you have this idea of how you think you come across in your head, and then there's the reality. Funnily enough, having this YouTube channel has been a bit confronting, at least to watch back when it comes to editing. You could also record a video of yourself if you want, but recording your voice should actually be enough to get some valuable input. 3. Take a moment to think when needed. So when I've been interviewing people, I've noticed that 99% of the time, as soon as a question is asked, they start talking. And there really is no pressure or no need to start talking straight away. You can take a moment to gather your thoughts and then start talking. One thing I want people to be aware of in this is that when you take a moment to pause and think, it may feel like a very long time when you're doing it, but on the receiving end, it really isn't that long. And it's not something that's going to be held against you. So let's say you're asked a question that you had to think back, okay, what experience do I have? Or what struggles have I had in these areas? I can't think of anyone who'll go, ooh, Nicola had to spend a few seconds to think about that. Oh, we should cross her off the list. Let's not hire her. I just don't see that happening. But what happens is you ask a question and they start talking, and they're trying to talk and think at the same time. And then they just don't really answer the question, or they've shown that they don't really know what they're talking about. Now, maybe they did actually have in their head a valuable answer to the question, and maybe they did have relevant experience, but it didn't actually come across with what they said. So that's something to be aware of. 4, feel free to bring notes in an interview. I have found this can be quite useful for the questions I wanted to ask. I picked up this tip from one of my fellow grads in my first job back in New Zealand. And I was like, oh my God, wow, that's so amazing. And the reason I think it's amazing is you don't forget to ask the questions you want to ask. And 2, I think it takes into consideration that your ability to remember things or to think can be somewhat constrained under what can be seen as like a high pressure situation. That is a job interview. So you are helping your future self out by taking notes and being like, okay, these are the questions. Here's like 6 questions I want to ask. Chances are a few of them will be addressed through the scope of the interview. So you're like, cross that one out. But there should hopefully be a few remaining by the end. Which leads me to 5. Show curiosity and ask questions when you're given the opportunity to do so. You don't have to wait until the end. You could also make it a conversation, of course, and ask questions, or the questions that you have, when the conversation topic naturally goes in that direction. Unless you're explicitly told to save any questions you have to the end, then maybe I would wait with them. So some examples of questions you could ask would be, can you describe the typical software testing process with a company? So for me, the good thing about this question is, from both sides, is one, you're showing that you're curious about how they work, and then two, as the candidate, you get to have an idea of what sort of environment are you looking to walk into. Two, what testing tools and technologies are commonly used here and why? And the "and why" is a key part of this question. So again, you're showing curiosity, but two, you're showing that you want to understand the reasoning behind certain decisions and what they consider in their approach and so on. Three, how is the testing team structured and what is the size of the team? So you can have like a core testing team. You could have testers split up between different teams, but then they are linked together with, say, some sort of community of practice or so on. So there's actually quite a bit of variation in which the different tests as an organization can be structured. Another question you could ask is common challenges the testers face, or that the common challenges they face regarding quality or development in general, or software quality. That is something I think would be interesting to know. And then lastly, ask about their day-to-day, about how they currently work, about the current projects they're working on, and hopefully they can tell you a bit about that. Anywho, interviews aren't easy. Actually, they make they make me nervous, but hopefully with these 5 tips, at least your next interview will go a little bit better.